So I'm looking over our notes from class 2. We talked about ethnocentric multiculturalism and how that in our culture creates this system of oppression. We were talking about how, what are the therapeutic implications, I guess, and something that stood out to me was that because of this, ethnic minorities tend to disassociate from their true selves, which is, it sucks. It's an interesting thing because I feel like ethnocentric monoculturalism is a thing because of a lack of self-awareness, and in turn pushes people away from their true selves, on purpose. And that is maybe, subconsciously or consciously, I don't know, it's an interesting thing that with this lack of self-awareness, our systems are pushing people to be less and less self-aware, and that's not the goal. It shouldn't be the goal. But in turn, if I, as a counselor, am self-aware, I can help people, especially ethnic minorities, be confident and own who they are and be confident in their true self. As a counselor, I definitely would never want to push that authenticity away. And so, yeah, I'm excited to keep digging in and become more self-aware so that I can help other people be confident in themselves. And yeah, that's just something that stood out to me this class. Another thing that I thought about this class, Dr. Bolton, you were talking about how when a client, you were specifically talking about for counselors that are people of color, if their client says something belligerent or racist to them, you encourage them to say, when you said blank, my experience with your words could be painful for someone who identifies as a part of this group that you're referring to. And that gives me the language that I need, I guess, in conversations where people are oh, well, I'm not offended by that, so why should you be? I feel like I can finally say yeah, but that what you said isn't taking into account the experience of all people. And that's, I don't know, I feel like I finally have the language to say these things aren't okay to say, but I can also do that in an empathetic and compassionate way, which is I feel like the only good way to handle conflict. So yeah, I don't know, I feel more confident that even if one of my clients says something rude or something that hurts my feelings, or that I feel like I'm taking personally, or even just don't agree with, that could potentially hurt another group of people, I feel like I finally can say what I need to say in a more eloquent way, which is awesome. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so I'm gonna reflect on some things that I've been thinking about from class. The first thing is from the microaggressions lecture. I thought this was just a super insightful lecture that made me really think about the ways that I have used microaggressions, and some of the ways that I have experienced them on the other side of it. But yeah, so for an example of something that when we were unpacked some of the microaggressions that we had with our classmates, and I didn't think about this until after, but I worked in a bakery, and I've worked in customer service for the last forever, it feels like, just like part-time and then full-time. But I've experienced a lot of awful comments from men specifically, and the most recent was this guy came into the bakery and basically was just like saying super inappropriate things to me. And when we were checking out, I asked him if he wanted to leave a tip, and he was like, well, I'll give you like 10% tip, but if you took your hair down, then I'd give you more. Yeah, so that I didn't realize at the time, but now I know that was a microaggression against my gender, and also just like devaluing my worth into my physical appearance, which sucks. But then on the other hand, I was thinking about like, okay, what are microaggressions that I fall short and do on accident? And one specific one that we talked about was asking someone, what are you? Like, I never really had the right language when I was asking about someone's identity, specifically their ethnicities. And Dr. Bolton, you offered like the best advice ever. And instead of asking, what are you? We should ask, hey, tell me about your background, which is so smart, like so wise, and it leaves so much room, like you said, for them to tell us like whatever they want us to know, and doesn't put them in a box that we've already labeled with bias in our heads. So I thought that was just like so profound, and like such a good practical way to like combat the ways that I fall short in terms of microaggressions. So that's one thing. And let's see, what else? Okay. Also, so we were talking about classism last class, and I asked a question, could you have like struggles with your identity if you grew up in one class and moved up a class? And I asked this because I grew up in a family who I guess we were probably considered to be like working class. I'm not really sure. I know that my mom was the only one working, and her salary was like really close to poverty line. But so I grew up in that situation where it was like really hard, and but now have moved out, gone to college, and like I would consider myself now to be like middle class, considering all my like my educational privilege and like my ability to support myself and that kind of thing. But it's interesting because when I identify myself, I guess my class, I still think about it in the ways that I used to, like growing up. And so like a lot of that like shame, I guess, and like the feelings associated with poverty have kind of leaked into my identity, even though I've moved out of it. And it's also like, I think I thought about in the way like that, like this is an extreme example, but like the Holocaust survivors, they have, the ones that have survived, like experience survivor's guilt sometimes. And I feel like in a way like I can relate in this situation. Like I kind of feel guilty in some ways for like being able to like support myself and that kind of thing. So yeah, I've just been reflecting on that, and yeah, it's something to unpack in my own counselor, honestly. But there have been so many more things in the class that have just stood out to me, but those have been the ones that I wanted to also, one more, okay. We were talking about Nicole Hannah Jones, yes, and how she had like a platform behind her, and you were talking about how like in that situation with her, you couldn't help but think about the people that don't have a platform, and when it went on to say like we as counselors can be that platform for people. And I just like, oh, that was like such an affirming thing to hear, that I'm like in the right place in my career. Like I'm excited, and like this set, I don't know, it just like makes me so excited and passionate about being a counselor, because we get to be like the voice to the voiceless, and like the advocate for the ones who like don't have anyone else rooting for them. And so that's just like so special to me and such a gift. And so I'm really excited to be able to be studying this and taking your class. And yeah, I'm excited to keep learning. I'll stop rambling now, but